Mr. Fiennes, it's good to see you, sir. Thank you so much for doing
Hello,
this
Josh.
today.
Hi.
Congratulations on the new film. This is one of those things where you hear Matthew Vaughn, you hear Ray Fiennes, and my mind as a lover of both of your works boggles at like, what is that combination going to look like? And the answer is, it works. It's fantastic.
Good.
So congratulations all around. We'll get to The King's Man in a second, but first, just for some context, and because you've spent so much of your life in the theater, and I know you're working in the theater right now outside of doing some press for this film, give me a sense of the last year. I mean, I know your production with David Hare was one of the first productions, I think, back home of that scale.
Yes, that was a monologue David Hare wrote about he had COVID in April, March of 2020. And he wrote about it in the form of a monologue, also having a go at our government's pretty inadequate response at the time to the arrival of COVID in the UK. And it was quite visceral and angry and funny. And I think audiences appreciated this kind of cathartic speaking of frustrations and bewilderment and the description of having the illness.
Was it
and then this year?
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead, sir. Yeah.
No, I mean, now I'm just doing something else. I'm doing this production of a poem by T.S. Eliot called The Four Quartets, which some people may know. It's a beautiful, complex poem which we put on in the summer. And I toured it through different regional cities in the UK, and now it's coming towards the end of a short run in London.
Read the David Hare production. You mentioned catharsis for the audience. Was it also catharsis for you? I mean, we were all going through collective trauma in the last year and a half. It must have been a fascinating experience for you to kind of deliver that emotion of David's on stage night after night.
Yeah, it was strong stuff. I mean, he didn't pull any punches about what he felt about our government's handling, and I agreed with the principle of where his anger was coming from. And he's such an electric writer. I mean, it was strong stuff, but also touching about being vulnerable to the symptoms of the illness. And it was one of the first productions, if not the first production, back after the first lockdown in London,
right,
at the Bridge Theatre. But it was also in sync with other monologues, some by Alan Bennett. So the Bridge came back, the Bridge Theatre came back with a series of monologues. But I think that Beat the Devil was the newest of them.
I mean, your name is synonymous with great theater the last couple decades, sir. I mean, did you feel almost a responsibility, a compulsion to be one of the first out of the gate to bring theater back?
It wasn't really. It didn't. I mean, the Beat the Devil didn't come from me. I mean, weirdly, I've been planning a production with the Bridge, actually about a great American figure, Robert Moses, the New York City planner. But that's coming up next year. But because of what COVID was doing, David wrote this piece, and Nick Heitner, the director and artistic director of the Bridge, said, "Rafe, would you be interested in doing it?" So I was excited to do it. It was just alive at the time. I don't know whether and we filmed it too, actually. We recorded it.
Right.
I don't know if it would be something to redo again, because it was so of the moment, and it was just okay. It still felt a little bit late because it was so hot off the press in it's what he was saying. But no, I mean, it was exciting because, like everyone, we didn't know what was happening in the theatre, particularly. We didn't know how that was going to come back. And a lot of West End theatres were suffering and closing, and a lot of commercial producers were very uncertain about the future of the theatre. So, I mean, I think that Nick Heitner, who ran the National Theatre for a long time, is a great visionary about where theatre can go. And he's also got a great overview of all kinds of theatre, all from, comedy, popular entertainment, to some maybe more niche kinds of playwriting. But because he's run the National Theatre, he comes with a great breadth of awareness about what audience would like, the menu of what an audience can can hope to see.
Was the early ambition to do both theater and film when you were starting out? Was you did so much of your early work primarily on the stage? Was film part of the dream, or was that an unexpected evolution?
Film theater was what I mean, I grew up listening to recordings of actors like Laurence Olivier and my mum taking me to the theater, and that was the theater was the thing. I think I've just thought that was my dream. The film just felt so far away, like a remote thing, that theater was, you know, I was living in London as an art student. Theater was on my doorstep, but the world of film just felt kind of impossible. So yeah, when I went to drama school, and then I was happy to get invited to join the National Theatre, then after that Royal Shakespeare Company. So yeah, no, theatre was the thing. But once I was invited to be in films, I got, you know, then I saw what films can do and how actors can communicate very differently in films than the theatre. And it's fascinating and great. It's great to be able to, I'm lucky that I can go between the two. Because I think you can take from one for the other, you know, the sort of interior shifts that the camera likes to see in the human face that probably wouldn't transmit on a stage, but you can bring to bear that same interior life on stage, because actually, if you're only projecting and gesticulating in a theatrical way, it becomes just a mask. Right. So, you know, I think the film, the truth that film likes is absolutely a requirement for the theatre, except the theatre audiences in the theatre, there's a different vocal and gestural language, which also is exciting to manage, to use as a way of expression.
And not to mention, you know, bringing us to the film you're promoting today, The King's Man, you can say a lot of things about it. It would not work on the stage. This is something designed for cinema. Yeah. And as I alluded to at the outset, I'm a big fan of Matthew Vaughn, and I'm sure you are as well. And I think it's probably for some of the same reasons. This is a man who, in this era of blockbusters and, you know, giant action films, and I've certainly seen more than my share, there are very few filmmakers that can bring a life, a vitality, a singular vision to them outside of Matthew. Yeah. Were you, I mean, do you track directors? Were you much aware of Matthew's work prior to this?
Not much. I had seen the first Kingsman and enjoyed it very much.
Yeah.
And then I caught up with stuff that I hadn't seen, like Kick-Ass, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, Kick-Ass, Layer Cake. I mean, they're all fantastic. Yeah.
No, I think I was completely taken aback by Matthew's kind of mix of in-your-face action with totally unpredictable storytelling that's exciting. You just don't know where it's going to go. And that was the same on the page when you read this Kingsman prequel. And Matthew engaged with me in a very genuine way. He really wanted my input. He genuinely wanted to have ideas. And, you know, I mean, we discussed one or two quite extreme scenes around the depictions of the Russian Tsar, which were not something I can describe on a public TV channel. But they were they didn't make the movie, but they were. But I mean, when you read it, it was like, oh my God, he's really.
He likes shock value, and he somehow makes it work, though.
Yes, and that's right. And the sort of, although what I read originally wasn't in the film, but the shock value is still there, I think, in the film.
Oh, absolutely.
And the surprise element, and also the humor. You don't know. You're sort of taken aback by, oh my God, this is happening. I never saw this coming.
Well, we always talk, you know, in these kind of conversations about finding the right tone in a film, and a film like this is a challenge. I mean, it's a challenge to find that tone that can shift between. I mean, I'm sure part of the ingredients for you as an actor approaching it is this character from the start is just dealing with real human trauma and loss. Yeah. Like, this is like, yes, this is, in some ways you might think of this as a frivolous, fun kind of 4-quadrant action movie, but the bones of it, for you as an actor, there's a lot to chew on, and that must be a relief for you.
That was why the part was attractive, because there was a lot to chew on in terms of his past and what he's dealing with. And I mean, I was aware that Matthew was it was a high stakes proposal, because he was dealing with family trauma, high profile, high intensity, humorous action sequences with the horrors of the First World War and the trenches, which are very real and still resonate. Certainly in the UK, the First World War still sits as a painful historical thing. So how is he going to bring all these things together and not veer into something which felt like in bad taste?
Sure.
But I just thought, well, he's smart and he knows the danger areas. After talking to him, I was aware that he knew the pitfalls. But I just thought, this is a great part. It's a great arc. And I just thought I must just play the guy, certainly for the first 2/3, completely straight, where the humor is in situations. There are other characters that bring to bear so humorous or kind of satirical element. And the Duke of Oxford is meant to be the straight center of the story.
And the reluctant hero. Nothing better than a reluctant hero.
Reluctant hero. That's a good, that's right, yeah.
So there's also, I mean, I don't know if you agree with me, but there's a certain irony that this is perhaps your most physically taxing role, I would imagine, at least in some time. Like, I mean, in your 50s, you're getting to do the action that most 25-year-olds normally would do. Is that a badge of honor, something that you kind of enjoyed? Like, I can be the guy at my age now. I can this is, I have.
I mean, there's a little boy in me that longs to do action sequences, actually, and particularly the kind of more I mean, like with the sword fight. I love stage fighting when I was younger, and I've always loved. Now, when I did Hamlet, I loved the duel in the Hamlet that I did was directed by Bill Hobbs, one of the great sword fighting directors ever. He did all the sword fights for Ridley Scott's The Duelists.
Sure. He's
got a great list of credits. So to be directed by Bill Hobbs was fantastic. And I love those old films where those actors from the 30s and 40s could really fight. I mean, there's no stunt. There's Errol Flynn and Basil Rathbone, Tyrone Power, amazing. And I can't claim to have their skill, but I definitely loved rehearsing that sword fight. And so, it was fun. It was fun. I got to do stuff that I didn't expect to be asked to do at my age.
Do you take a certain pride, as much pride after completing like a physical scene like that as like a dialogue heavy scene? Is it a different sort of pride?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There is. And there was a great, very committed, dedicated stunt team directed, sadly, by the Brad Allen, who's now sadly passed.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
He died earlier this year, but he was a lovely man. He was dedicated to realizing Matthew's vision in terms of action sequences, very, very fastidiously perfectionist about every single shot. And the gratification was Brad saying, a bit like those teachers at school who were a bit scary, but you wanted them to say, well done. And Brad had that effect. He wasn't scary, but he was intense. So when he good job, that was good. It felt like high praise.
What about,
that was...
What about the satisfaction there have been certain kinds of films in your career where I would imagine seeing the finished product must be fascinating, because you can read it on the page, you can talk to Matthew, but until you see something like this put together with the editing and the sound and the music, much like the Harry Potter films, I'm sure they look great on set, but like, again, it is a tapestry. It is a filmmaker's medium for these kinds of films in particular. Is there something that awakens inside of you when you see the finished product for the first time in a film like The King's Man or a Harry Potter film?
Yeah, no, every time you see any film you've done, it's always interesting, terrifying, sometimes gratifying, sometimes disappointing. And also because it's so subjective, it's, one's own face and stuff, then you kind of wrestle with all that stuff of watching yourself, which is complicated. But so yes, it's always, with this, I thought when I saw this, I thought Matthew has a real handle on this. And I didn't, usually you can, if something isn't right or you don't like the way you're shot or the scene, you can just feel a little disturbance in your inner being. Oh my God, this just felt, I don't know how other people, I just felt, no, this seems to flow. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And,
So So going back, if you'll indulge me a little bit, you alluded to this before about sort of your theater being the first love and something you were exposed to as a child. I mean, your parents were both in the arts. I know your mother was a novelist, your father a photographer.
That's right.
Were they the biggest influences in your life in terms of exposure to the arts? Do you remember how you kind of found your way?
My father was definitely a supporter of everything I did, but my mother was a key inspiration. She would have introduced me to Shakespeare, to Hamlet, to poetry, to the theatre. Actually, my sister joked with me, because I'm doing this T.S. Eliot, and so much of my love of T.S. Eliot comes from my mother's love of him and of poetry. So there I am in the West. I'm doing it now. I do the red carpet for The Kingsman, which is the kind of film my dad would have loved. He would have loved me playing that kind of stoic man of integrity, decent, reluctant hero. And he would have loved all that stuff. And so my sister, she said, there you are going from what Daddy would have liked to what our mum would have liked. Because I left the red carpet. I had to literally go into the theatre and prepare for the show.
Amazing, yes. It must have been, fascinating when I was doing the chronology of your career. Schindler's List, of course, exploded and changed the course of your life. And if I'm remembering it correctly or seeing the dates right, you suffered the loss of your mother right around that time.
That's right. No, she died at the very end of '93. So Schindler's List was filmed in the spring of '93, and my mum sadly died at the very, very end of December '93. So it was a funny time. I mean, not funny, hilarious. I mean, it was odd and emotional and full of grief. But I mean, it was because there was Schindler's List getting such an extraordinary response. And I was reeling from the loss of my mother at the time.
Yeah.
So it was bewildering, because I suppose, the sort of movement of focus on the film and the success, when people being asked to fly here for this event and that, and probably not really having time. People say you need time to grieve, and I suppose I didn't. I mean, I found a time, but then it was bewildering.
I saw, actually, that I'm going to complete it. I started to watch just last night. There was a film you did just a few years later about your mom, one of your mother's novels, I believe. And it seems like that was a way perhaps of reckoning a bit.
That's right. We did that. I think it was in support of a last novel she wrote was posthumously published, thanks to Liz Calder, who then ran Bloomsbury Books. And the path of the novel, having a readership, was that Michael Ondaatje read it, and Liz was his publisher.
Wow.
And she read it and wanted to do it. And so I think the film was made to support the publication of the novel called Blood Ties.
Right. I'm curious, we talked about sort of like your theatrical career early on, and I would think kind of the path that the kind of parts you want, the kind of career you're going to forge. And on the film side, once Schindler's List happens and Quiz Show happens, like, did you feel like you knew what kind of film career you wanted? Was there a clear path for you, or was it sort of just, I'm figuring this out as I go, I'm just taking the best material, I'm going with my gut? I mean, give me a sense of what your attitude was.
Well, it was I think for any actor who's lucky enough to be in a film that has that kind of success, and to work with directors like Spielberg or Redford or their equivalent today, whoever they may be, and to have that, when the film business here, I suppose I'm talking about Hollywood or the LA-based film business, when that looks at you favorably because of what you've been in, it's a tantalizing and also quite unnerving time, because I had no points of reference. I had the films that I liked. I didn't know who. There's so much ignorance about who one should work with. What is a good film script? You're not always. A lot of scripts are sent to you, and of course, you're flattered, your ego is massaged by lots of attention and meetings and lunches with exciting directors who want to work with you. And it's your, so it was quite, it wasn't unpleasant. It was just, if I look back now thinking, I thought, oh, that young man was a bit bewildered. He was sort of, where to, you know, how do you hold on to your truth, whatever that is?
Right. Well, because in theater, again, I'm going to go Shakespeare and Pinter, and I'm going to follow the greats. But in film, it's just sort of a little more amorphous of what is a film career for a 30-year-old man with your experience. It must have been, because like it occurs to me like today, given that kind of success, you would be Doctor Strange today. Like you would have been plucked out, Marvel would have sucked you in, and you would be doing Marvel film after Marvel film. And that might be nice, but that would be a different path, a different life.
Well, I think I made choices that surprised people. I think The English Patient was I'm very proud of that film. I'm working with a great mind, Anthony Minghella, with great actors, Willem Dafoe, Juliette Binoche, Kristen Scott Thomas, and Saul Zaentz behind it. So that felt definitely of something of worth, of value, a great emotional scope, a filmically interesting proposition of different time zones, and Anthony's intelligence and his way of working with everyone was, you know, was an extraordinary experience for everyone involved. And that was recognized as an achievement as a film. But I think then I did Oscar and Lucinda, which is a quirky story, beautiful story by Peter Carey, Gillian Armstrong directing. And I remember that it didn't have the crazy response. It had a sort of respectful response, but it wasn't a huge hit at all. What I would remember is I wanted to play that part. I believed it was about love and faith, and the sort of the gambling at the center of it is about choices in life and how you take a risk on something. And so there's quite a complex idea at the heart of the story. And I love this character, Oscar Hopkins, but he's quirky, he's geeky. And, you know, I followed the descriptions, but my hair dyed red. And that was all where I had the chance to work with great Kate Blanchett opposite me as Lucinda. But I remember an interview with the Hollywood Foreign Press, and it was like, why are you doing that? As if I had made a reverse choice. But
in retrospect,
so
no, but you
encounter, but the thing is, I've never regretted something I've made a choice to, because I believed in the material, I've believed in what it was about, and who knows what a film can happen. I've always thought there were one or two choices, which I won't go into, where I did that slightly for the wrong reasons. Like, is that a good career move, or will I be seen in this light? And those they seem like a kind of calculated choice, whereas sometimes the ingredients just feel great, just feel right, and you go with your gut, and you don't know how it's going to come out, but you go, something in here says, like the Bigger Splash, a film I did with Luca Guadagnino. I love that part, not a part I get asked to play, and a sort of outrageous, loud, brash, kind of willful record producer, Harry, but alongside Tilda Swinton and Matthias Reinhardt, and but I love Luca's world and his intelligence, and so I met Luca and I read the script. That felt, and I did okay, but that felt like everything felt aligned in a good way.
Well, it does feel like you've devoted much of your film career to something that is sadly diminishing more and more, which is the adult drama, which is like, I think, The End of the Affair is another film we could mention that I feel like not many people think back to, but it was a great Neil Jordan film at the time, Constant Gardener. These are just like, look, in retrospect, you've worked with the greats and you've devoted yourself to the right material. So there should be no second guessing. I'm curious, here's one random one that just came up when I was reading up on you. There was talk about a fork in the road that Joel Schumacher had you in mind potentially to play Batman at one point. Do you remember any conversation?
No, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. No, I mean, I think I've never really, I suppose I grew up liking what you call the adult dramas.
Yeah.
And and I still like them. I think what's a little, I think because of the huge success of streaming series, TV streaming series that go on and on and on,
Yep.
that what's being eroded is the belief in, or the commercial viability of the film, the adult film that's 2 hours long that deals with drama. It can be a film noir, it can be a romance, it can be something like The End of the Affair. It doesn't have to be a literary base to it, but those are the films that I grew up with. And my awareness of film at all that I like was those kinds of films,
Yeah.
You mentioned Harold Pinter, but he did some great screenplays like The Servant and Accident and French Lieutenant's Woman. So those, that kind of film, that seems to be, I think, Netflix are making those kinds of films, but
they just happen to be 10 hours. Yeah.
What?
They just happen to be 10 hours long.
Yeah. Well, they're for street. I mean, where are we with the cinema? I suppose, going. What's going to happen to the cinema experience?
It is the existential question for folks like us that have devoted our lives to cinema, and I don't know if we have the answers quite yet. Harry Potter always comes up, as it should. You are, to a generation, to future generations, will always be Voldemort. When last we spoke, I remember you said that there was some initial trepidation on your part. What was the key thing you were worried about going into something like that, and how was it alleviated?
It was ignorance. I hadn't read the books. I was aware of the first two films being these young children and wizards, and it felt like I hadn't invested in it, or I hadn't been curious about it. Possibly in my ignorance, a bit dismissive. And then a very great casting director called Mary Selway, sadly also no longer with us, but someone who had been a big part of my early career, and a woman I profoundly respected, at the time not at all well, was casting the film of the fourth, I think, Harry Potter film in which Voldemort is reborn out of the cauldron. Up until then, he'd just been seen, I think, as a digital animated figure coming out of someone's head. So no actor had yet played Voldemort. And I was, because I was not invested in the series or the evolvement of J.K. Rowling's world, I had no clue as to how important Voldemort was. There was a combination of factors. It was Mary being incredibly insistent. And when Mary was insistent, you sort of listened. And then my sister Martha, who has three children, who were then right at that age, maybe sort of 11, 10, 7. And I think I said, I don't know, I've been asked to do this Voldemort. What do you think? She went, what? You've got to do it. You're crazy, you're crazy. So then I kind of woke up, I think. And then I got into it, what it meant in the J.K. Rowling universe and the world, and that he was this extreme satanic figure, snake-like evil element. And then I went for it, I went for it, and then got completely into it and loved it.
Certainly did. Have you seen Cursed Child on stage? And I mean, it feels inevitable at some point that they will turn that into a film. And indeed, Voldemort does factor in. Is that an intriguing proposition to you?
I have to confess, I've not seen it on stage. So, but I would be up for revisiting Voldemort, for sure, for sure.
I recently just did a Q&A with Daniel Craig and Cary Fukunaga about No Time to Die. Quite a big swing of a final film for Daniel in that series. Was that a no-brainer? I assume, was it Sam Mendes that came to you, or Robert Broccoli? Was that something that was an easy yes?
Well, it was funny one, because actually a while back, Barbara Broccoli talked to me once about possibly playing Bond. And that didn't happen. But Sam Mendes, as we know, directed Skyfall, and the pitch was very attractive at the time. Judi Dench, M, dies, and you're set up as the next M. And I thought, great. I also love Daniel's Bond.
Yeah.
And I just respected Sam's intelligence and what the approach to it and the way what he was doing with it. I thought it was, Skyfall was a great script. It was great. Although I think I can say now that I had to fight off an attempt by Sam in Spectre to make M. I said, I don't want to play M and then you turn around and make him the bad guy. M is never the bad guy.
Oh, wow. He was going to be on the other side.
I had to have some pretty intense discussions with Sam saying, this is not flying with me. M isn't.
So wait, was he in league with Blofeld? Was that?
Yeah. No, it was like, yes, he was Blofeld or something, but that was that was a red line for me.
This is not what I signed up for. This is not what you sold me. Was that an intriguing proposition way back when you talked to Barbara about potentially even playing Bond? I mean, again, just that the kid in you must have been intrigued by that notion.
Yes, I'm not sure I'd have been very good as Bond. I mean, I liked the books a lot when I was in my teens. I liked the films, particularly the earlier Connery films. I had a teenage obsession with Bond. And so when that day came, of course, I was flattered. But I think they tried to do this up to a point when Daniel came into the franchise. I mean, they went back to Casino Royale and they kind of honored.
Right.
I mean, because of the way the films evolved through the 80s and 90s, 70s, 80s, 90s, they got kind of fun, bizarre. I mean, you know, Roger Moore was great entertainment, but they got further and further from the quite dark, slightly acidic, dangerous sort of nocturnal world of the books and a kind of flinty, difficult, slightly elitist mindset of Bond and kind of, I mean, highly individual and kind of, you know, he had his views, he's quite opinionated. Fleming's lots of ways, but, you know, he would probably be cancelled a million times over, the Bond of the books now.
That's true. Yeah.
But I liked what I imagined, that there could be a Bond, a filmic world, which would be set right in the 50s, that you would do Casino Royale right in the 50s, and it would be dark, but it would be really tough. And that, you know, you would be quite brave with the violence in it, and you would be quite unapologetic about the sex in it. So it'd be quite tough, you know, it'd be quite grown up, and like the books are. I mean, well, they're not. Are they grown up? Maybe not.
But I think your point.
They have a steely. They have a steely kind of. I mean, I think they offend some people because they are. And now in the current climate, they probably wouldn't fly at all. But I mean, that's what I remember thinking. Oh, could the Bond films go down this noirish, almost even a black and white world? But I don't think that was. Anyway, you know, I think it's not for me to say. But I think early on, I think what I read about when Cubby Broccoli bought the options on the Bond, the first thing they addressed was the kind of, he didn't have much sense of humor. They wanted to make him attractive and kind of wry and this thing. And I think they did quite rightly. They've made him, you know, we like Bond's humor and his kind of ironic detachment, and there's a wit. And I think they had to find something that women and men had to like. And that's, of course, as our taste has changed and what we find acceptable has changed. So, of course, and the Bond franchise reflects intelligently. And I think that's the sort of brilliant way that Barbara and Michael have managed it, is they've got, you know, really strong actors to play Bond. And Daniel, I think, is, you know, masterful in the way he's inhabited that. And they've kept they're alert to the world in which the franchise has to exist. And I think probably the period Bond that I have in mind is not.
I'd watch it for the record, but it's always a pleasure, sir. I really appreciate the time today. As I said, I'm a fan of yours and Matthew Vaughn, and the combination in The King's Man certainly delivers. And hopefully we'll get you back on the stage here in the States, in New York, one of these days as well.
Thank you. Great talking to you. Thank you.